Welcome.
Bine ați venit!
Aloha! Bem-vindos!
Yemawan Akwaba.
G'day!
Susday, yung samspakum net.
Bienvenidos.
Welcome.
Mabuhay!
Welcome.
Mainiton.
Affirmation creates worldwide communities of safety,
of love and hope.
A afirmação ela cria comunidades globais de segurança, de amor, de esperança.
La afirmación crea comunidades mundiales de seguridad, amor y esperanza.
And promotes understanding,
acceptance and self-determination.
Y promueve la comprensión, aceptación y autodeterminación.
E promove a compreensão, a aceitação e a autodeterminação
of individuals of diverse sexual orientations,
gender identities, and gender expressions.
De indivíduos de diversas orientações sexuais, como identidade de gênero e expressões.
De individuos sexuales, identidades de género y expresiones.
We affirm the inherent self-worth of LGBTQIA+ individuals
as complete, equal, and valuable persons.
Nós afirmamos o valor inerente das pessoas LGBTQIA+, como pessoas inteiras, iguais y valiosas.
Afirmamos el valor inherente de las personas LGBTQ como personas iguales, completas y valiosas.
And support them as they define their individual spirituality
and intersection with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
E nós a apoiamos na sua definição de espiritualidade individual e relacionamento com a Igreja de Jesus Cristo dos Santos dos Últimos Dias.
Apoyamos a definir su espiritualidad individual y su relación con la Iglesia de Jesucristo de los Santos de los Últimos Días.
Affirmation is a refuge to lend, to heal,
to share, and to be authentic.
A afirmação é um refúgio, é um lugar para encontrar, para curar, para compartilhar, para ser autêntico.
La afirmación es un refugio para llegar, para sanar, para compartir y ser auténtico.
We are so glad you are here.
We are so glad you are here.
Estamos muy contentos de que estés con nosotros.
We are so glad you are here.
E nós estamos muito felizes que você está aqui.
We are so glad that you're here.
We are so glad you are here.
Welcome to Affirmation.
Bienvenidos a Afirmación.
Welcome to Affirmation.
Welcome to Affirmation.
Bienvenido a Afirmación.
Welcome to Affirmation.
Seja bem-vindo à afirmação.
Welcome to Affirmation.
Hey, welcome everyone to an evening with Affirmation. Thank you so much for being here. We are still letting people in. If you see me looking up into my left-hand corner here, it's because I have the waiting room that's posted up there. Since we're under Fred's account, we've got that security feature turned on at the moment. So instead of everyone just being able to come in, we've got to let them in. So thank you so much for being here for an evening of Affirmation. This is really our first event as a whole affirmation community since the new EC came on board on March 1st. It's hard to believe it's only been about a month and a half since that happened. We're so glad that you're here. On screen, you should see sort of the program for this evening. We're going to do some welcome and introductions. We're going to talk about briefly the history, mission, and vision of Affirmation. It's always good to be reminded of some of those things. We're going to talk about some of our progress in recent months, what's next for Affirmation, what we're focused on as an EC, have an opportunity for question and answers. And then we're going to talk about what you can do right now and some actions that you can take to get more involved in Affirmation, support Affirmation's work. So we'll jump right into the program. And Fred, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, just mic check. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Everyone, welcome. Welcome tonight, and thank you so much for joining. It brings me great joy to be here and to see you all. It's been a while, I'm sure, for many of you to be at an event, so I am glad to see that you have joined us. So what I get to do is tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Fred Bowers. Probably I've been around, but most of you may not have seen or met me, but I've been around for quite some time. I joined Affirmation when I was attending a award here in DC during the 1990s. So that sort of aged me, but that is okay. But during my journey, I've done a lot since then in Affirmation. In 2012, I was the conference chairperson. And then also in 2012, I was fortunate enough to win Affirmation's Mornings Award. And so along the way, I've formed a couple of groups in Affirmation, the People of Gold Majority and BIPOC group and the Affirmation Pioneers group. So we have those two communities. So hopefully you are interested in those and you can join if you'd like. Additionally, I served on the board of directors here at Affirmation from 2011 to 2017. And then now I've joined and been at conferences and everything for some time. And of course, I joined recently last fall as senior vice president. And I'm fortunate enough that you have chosen to choose me to be president of Affirmation. So just a little bit about my personal life. I served in the Air Force for almost 20-something years. I stopped doing that in 2006. And then I started working in management consulting, and I've been doing that ever since about that time. And mostly I do a whole bunch of project management, program management, financial management, do other things for mostly federal clients. And then I attended, my bachelor's is in organization management. And then I also have a master's in public administration. So thank you very much for listening to all of that. I look forward to meeting you. And now I will pass the torch over to Joel to introduce himself.
Thanks, Fred. I'm Joel McDonald. I'm your Senior Vice President on the Executive Committee of Affirmation. I was a convert to the church in high school. I joined when I was 17. It was the result of an attempt to convert my Mormon friends to more mainstream evangelical Christianity that backfired. And so after a couple of years of study and meeting with missionaries and attending early morning seminary, even not as a member, I eventually was baptized when I was 17. That was while my family was stationed in Okinawa, Japan. I moved to Virginia for my senior year of high school, wrapped up high school, went on a mission to Colorado and Kansas. And it was really on my mission that I began to question and struggle with my sexual orientation, being that I am gay. So I have that experience of being a missionary on his knees late at night, asking to be changed, asking that this burden be lifted from me. Was fortunate enough to feel that that was not a burden that needed to necessarily be taken from me, that it was something that that I was created with, and that there was nothing to change. I came home from my mission, and a couple of years later resigned my membership in the church. So I am a former Latter-day Saint. And then that was 2008, 2009. I think I put my resignation letter in 2008 and received confirmation in 2009. Fast forward to 2015, I, after conversations with folks, decided to reinvestigate the church, and was in the midst of that when the exclusion policy that we're all very aware of came out, which changed that trajectory, and was no longer interested in pursuing that. But in that process found Affirmation, and have been connected with Affirmation really ever since. In 2017, was hired as the online content manager for Affirmation. In 2020, became director of operations, transitioned out of that position last year. And then as Fred was looking to form an EC, he and I had some great conversations about sort of direction for Affirmation. And I got excited about working with him and then working with David as the EC was formed to hopefully move affirmation forward and continue to be the resource for LGBTQ current and former Latter-day Saints to be a refuge to land, heal, share, and be authentic as we state in our mission. And so I'm just grateful to be here and grateful to continue serving this amazing community. I kind of got chills as we were starting the evening and viewing the mission and vision video that we've played so many times previously. It feels like coming home, and I'm just grateful for everyone to be here and this opportunity. And I'm going to hand it off to David.
Hey y'all, I'm David, he, him. I'm gay and cisgender. I work at a large university in Tampa, Florida as a research administrator, which means I do things like reconcile budgets and hire grad students and get participants paid. I grew up in the LDS Church, and my current calling at church is stake executive secretary. And it's just as thrilling as you think, making appointments and agendas for meetings and stuff. But it does give me a unique opportunity when general authorities come to my stake and they meet with the stake presidency. They also meet this gay man, and we have conversations, and sometimes they invite me for additional conversations when I travel to Utah. And I try to use those opportunities to increase their understanding as I share about my experiences and feelings and thoughts and questions and my reactions to things that they say. I have a blog on Tumblr called Nerdy Gay Mormon, and I wrote a post about the first general authority I met and telling him I'm gay, and it went viral. And I was out to a few people at that time. This is 2017, but that post outed me to everyone in my world. And being an out gay person at church was a difficult transition. And people had sent me, I learned about affirmation, and I attended the international conference in 2018. And I found people who got me on a level that no one else did. They could understand my history and my struggles and my hopes and everything that's involved here. And I left that conference feeling like I had some tools and ways of framing things to help me move forward as an openly gay Mormon. And I continue to come to the affirmation conferences. And a couple years ago, I was asked to work in Florida to bring activities here, and did that for a couple years. And then last year, I was asked to join the board of directors. And when Fred was deciding to run as president with Joel, I was asked to join as the vice president. And I'm happy to be involved with this organization and the community that it represents.
Awesome. Thank you, David. So now we want to learn a little bit about everyone here. So we've got some poll questions. So the first one is just to kind of get a sense of the level of belief in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints of those that are present. All of these polls are anonymous. We're just sort of trying to get a sense of who we're talking to, who's attending this evening. So let me find the right button to get the poll out. And so you should see a poll. Hopefully we have it adequately translated. So what is your current level of belief in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? And we'll just let that run for a little bit. We're at 50% participation. 63%. So with 73% responding, we've got 68% of you that have a moderate or strong belief in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which very much aligns with previous surveys that Affirmation has done for the Affirmation community is that there is still a level of belief in the church from the LGBTQ Latter-day Saint community. So we're at 79%, we've got 69% moderate to strong belief. So thank you for participating in that poll. Oh, I can share results. So now you should actually be able to see where we are. Again, these were anonymous. We're not tracking who you are with these answers. We just kind of wanted to get a sense of who you were. All right, so we'll stop sharing that. And then the next question we have is level of activity in the church, because we know that there's a difference between having a belief in the church and feeling like you can be active in the church. So let me pull that up. So level of activity, we will launch that. So the question is, what is your current level of activity in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? So high, moderate, low, or none. So with 80% so far answering, we've got 36% of folks saying that they have a high level of activity in the church, but 40% saying that they have no level of activity in the church, and everyone else sort of falling between that moderate and low. And again, this matches what we've found in the past. There is a fairly high level of belief among LGBTQ Latter-day Saints who participate in Affirmation, but a large portion of that population who are not active in the church for probably obvious reasons. But thank you for answering that question. I can share all the results there for a second. All right. And then the next question is, what is your current membership status in the church? So there's a difference between belief, activity, and membership. So we're trying to get a sense of that as well. All right, so far with 73% answering, 76% answering, we've got 74% of us are current members of the church, 13% are resigned, 9% have been excommunicated or their membership has been withdrawn, and we have one person who constitutes 4% of us who has never been a member of the church. So we'll go ahead and end that poll. So with 80% responding, those are the results. So for me, there weren't any really surprises in that poll, but I have a very important, hopefully not controversial question that I want everyone to answer. And that is, what is your preferred ice cream flavor? Again, very important. So we'll launch that, and because we just had to give choices, we're going between chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. So out of those choices, what is your preferred ice cream flavor? Again, this is the most important question we're going to ask you this evening. 56%, chocolate's winning by a mile. We got some folks that really had to think about this question coming in here right at the last few seconds. All right, I'll go ahead and end that poll, share the results. So 76% of you answered, and chocolate was the big winner here, followed by vanilla at 30%, strawberry at 17%. This is not surprising to me. This would be my order of preference as well. So thank you for sharing a bit about your experience as LGBTQ Latter-day Saints or in the LGBTQ Latter-day Saint community, because I know that we do have some amazing allies, friends, and family members with us this evening as well. So I appreciate you taking time this evening to share a little bit about yourselves through those polls. Hopefully you might get a sense of everyone who's here and the wider community as well from the answers that we've shared. And I believe, David, you're going to start us out by walking through some history of affirmation.
Yes. So, as most of you are aware, the modern queer rights movement began in 1969 with the Stonewall riots, and the 1970s saw a lot of activism, and it also saw a lot of pushback, and both at a social level, but also in the church. And it was a rough time to be a queer Mormon, and there was a human rights conference being held in Salt Lake City, and Leonard Matlovic was a speaker there. He was perhaps the most famous gay man in America at the time, and several gay BYU students decided to attend that conference, and I believe they spoke with Leonard, and they decided to go ahead and form Affirmation while at the conference. They decided to support themselves if no one else was going to support them. And that's how Affirmation began. And they started by having weekly family home evening meetings as a way to meet with each other in fellowship. And soon chapters were being added in Los Angeles and Dallas. And in 1979, the leaders of the chapters got together for a meeting, and they decided to create a national charter, make this a national organization. And they had an election and chose a leader, and they started a newsletter. And in the years since then, Affirmation has continued to grow and prosper, and we went from 4 chapters to now 30 plus. We're located not just in the United States, but there are chapters in Canada, across Latin America. There's some in Europe and East Asia. The inspiration for Affirmation really came from the civil rights movements of the time, the women's rights and the gay rights movement of the 1970s, and seeing what religious queer people were doing in their other churches, and as the quest for recognition and non-discrimination and human rights advanced, Affirmation was there also. Affirmation marched in the gay pride parades and made themselves known as wanting to be part of the national movement. One thing about Affirmation, it's always been a big tent organization. All queer people and our family, friends, and allies are welcome to join Affirmation, regardless of your affiliation with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. No matter where you are in your faith journey, you have a home here. I since it began in 1977, that is 47 years ago, and this is an exceptional history legacy that we inherit, and Affirmation has been a part of queer Mormons supporting ourselves. So that's a very brief history. If you'd like to learn more, on the website, we have more detailed histories available.
Yeah, thank you, David. I'm just trying to follow our script here. I actually will share a link from a previous event where we hosted Affirmation 101 that talks a bit more about Affirmation's history. You'll see some photos of the past and a good discussion about that if you want to check that out. So thanks for that overview, David. So the mission of Affirmation, I'm not necessarily going to read it, but I will keep it on the screen right now. You heard it at the top. of the program. So that video included both our mission and our vision. But I just want to call out a couple things that I think are extremely important. So Affirmation revised its mission, I think in 2020, as part of a renewal of its strategic plan, to really try to make it focused on the individual first and community building around that. So if we start by saying Affirmation creates worldwide communities of safety, love, and hope. And while Affirmation is an organization and a community, it's really a community of communities. So as we try to support our chapters and affinity groups, and other groups that may form, it's various communities, and it is worldwide. You'll note this evening, if you were looking at the chat, we have a lot of individuals that are joining us this evening from Latin America, from Mexico. Just kind of scrolling through to take a look at this here. Looks like we have someone from Chile. We have a lot of activity in Latin America, which is beautiful to see. So we are trying to be an international organization, which is, I think, one thing that sets Affirmation apart as an organization. And then another key part of our mission talks about self-determination of the individual, and that self-determination of, their sexual orientation, their gender identity, their gender expression, but beyond that, what they believe, their relationship with the church, and that no matter what the choices are that people make that are best, that they determine are best for their spiritual, mental, and physical health, that they are complete, equal, and valuable persons. And I think those are very powerful statements within our mission. And it speaks to what David was sharing earlier about Affirmation being a big tent organization, that within our mission, regardless of how you determine your individual spirituality, your intersection with the church, you're welcome in Affirmation. But you'll also note that Affirmation in its mission isn't taking any sort of stance on whether you should be a member of the church or whether you shouldn't be a member of the church. It's not trying to provide those answers, but I think it's really trying to provide a community of communities, safe spaces where you can explore the challenges of being at that intersection and make decisions that you deem are best for you. And that's really what Affirmation is here to help you do.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my job here is to talk about the vision of Affirmation. One of the things that we think is important is to be a refuge. We've done that for many years. Ever since I've been in, we have been a refuge to land, heal, share, and be authentic. We also talk through that a bit every board meeting now to make sure that we are keeping in mind this principle, because it makes Affirmation itself and welcomes everyone. So now that we talked about the history, mission, and vision, I think our next thing we will go over will be our progress. And so Joel will talk to us about that.
Yeah. So on screen, just have an overview of some of the progress, especially over this last month and a half. But it really, Fred became president on January, or acting president on January 1st, and then elected president on March 1st. And that's when David and I joined him on the executive committee. So one of the important things to note is that we've really worked to ensure that we are a collaborative executive committee. From our introductions, you'll see that we have very diverse backgrounds and are different spaces when it comes to our spirituality, our relationship with the church, and all that is valuable in that collaborative effort as we work together and as we work with the Board of Affirmation to seek to move the mission of affirmation forward. So there's been a lot of work to increase collaboration. We've been working to improve financial controls and budgeting. When we took office as executive committee, Affirmation did not have a budget. As of last Sunday's board meeting, we had a budget pass. So now we have an operating budget, which is very helpful to the EC to get things done. So we're excited about that. But we've also taken a look at budgeting a little bit differently. We'll talk through some specific financial numbers and reasons why later to make sure that we are investing where we need to invest for the financial health of affirmation. So the next bullet point is really strengthening affirmation's financial health and figuring out how we can invest in ways to do that. Clarifying responsibilities and structure. This is always a major task for any leaders of any organization that are starting out. Fortunately, Affirmation had a lot of structure and processes and policies in place, but there's always additional questions that come up, and we're trying to answer those questions and document those things better and leave Affirmation as an organization better than when we found it. And I think that's always a major goal of any leadership team. Auditing chapter and affinity group activity, we'll get in specifics of that a bit later, but we've been sending out questionnaires or surveys to chapter leaders and affinity group leaders to try to determine what the level of activity is, what the commitment is to continue serving, and just trying to get a pulse on the health of affirmation outside of the central organization. So the health of the affirmation communities that are our chapters and affinity groups. And then resuming regular activities was crucial for us. And that's really why we're here this evening. We said we wanted to have an opportunity for folks to get together, to meet with us, to hear about what affirmation is doing, and to hopefully pivot to regular activities that are more focused on providing the sort of community and support for LGBTQ Latter-day Saints on a more regular basis, not only centrally in likely virtual environments like this, because we are around the world, but also in our local communities, our chapters, and our affinity groups. So tonight kicks off what I hope will be the resumption of regular activities in affirmation.
So I just want to point out a couple things on this slide about the community. It's got quite a breadth. If you look at the bottom line, our virtual reach is quite expansive. 22,000 followers on Facebook, 65,000 people visited the Affirmation website last year. As far as, and we do have email subscribers, and we send them the newsletter every month. As far as our chapters, our in-person opportunities to meet, there's over 30 of those, and they're spread around the world. I believe I think we're going to talk about the audit that we've done of those chapters, but during the COVID lockdown, a lot of activities ceased to happen, and we've been slow to resume normal activities at local levels, and so as an EC, we are looking to revitalize some of these chapters and chapter activities, and provide more opportunities for in-person gatherings. And also, as an example this evening, we'd like to also do provide opportunities for virtual interactions and gatherings. So I believe you'll be notified of future activities as we get those ready and roll them out.
Thanks, David. And connected to the next topic that I'm going to discuss before we switch slides, I do want to sort of call attention to the number of voting members as of today, which is 196. And that number is important because that number represents the number of people who have donated at least $10 in the calendar year to Affirmation, and the number of volunteer leaders who are serving in various roles in affinity groups and chapters as well. Love to see that number become a lot larger. I know that there's a lot more support out there than that 196 represents, and we'll discuss that a bit more later in the evening. But I do want to, as we talk about 30,000 community members, which is really anyone who's connected to Affirmation, over 4,000 subscribers, 196 voting members. I think there's a lot of room for growth there, especially considering the low barrier to becoming a voting member, and then just how connected Affirmation is by all the other numbers. So speaking of numbers, we're going to talk about financial strength. We did in questions, there were a couple of questions submitted prior to the event. Thank you for those that did submit some questions asking about Affirmation's finances. So I wanted to give just sort of a snapshot of where Affirmation has been in recent years and where we are now. So I'm using ending balances to sort of show Affirmation's financial strength over the last 5 years. So in 2019, we ended the year at $34,376. We increased that quite a bit into 2020 at almost $69,000. We increased that even more in 2021 to almost $140,000. But you'll note that there are some stars there because these numbers were really positively affected by COVID, in that in 2020 and in 2021, we didn't have in-person international conference, which is both the largest revenue stream that usually comes into Affirmation and by far the most expensive thing that Affirmation does. And so what you see in 2020 and 2021 is largely the result of people continuing to donate and support Affirmation, which we are so grateful for, but not having to spend a great deal of money on international conference. So in 2022, things settled down to $79,751, which is a reduction, but we returned to an in-person international conference in 2022. So 2020 and 2021 are weird years for us financially. But leading into 2023, you'll see that year over year, our ending balance was reduced by 90%. And so this is what this executive committee has inherited financially, and what we are working from. And so we've had to make some strategic budget decisions to make sure that we can continue to move forward as an organization. Our current balance is almost $31,000, which is a 270% increase from where we ended the year. But our budgeted ending balance, and this is that if everything goes right according to what we think is a very conservative budget, ends us at $10,270, which is 24% more than what we ended in last year. I will note that our current balance does include a $10,000 sponsorship for international conference. So our efforts to raise funds for that and other purposes are already underway. And we actually hope to exceed our budget expectations here and end the year in even a stronger position than we are budgeting. But again, it is a very conservative budget that we've put together.
Hello, everyone. So now I will talk to you about our U.S. chapters and leaders. So we have 30 chapters, and again, we talked about our inventory that we did with everyone to see what their interest was, how they were doing, what events they were having. So one of the things you see here that we have 60% of our US chapters have leaders, which does mean that we need more leaders, and we'll talk about that later in the presentation. But thankfully, and really thankfully to all of our leaders that responded, so a good number of them responded, about 83%. And then about 33 of them had activities. And again, great thanks to everyone who is still willing to lead, with 68% of our US chapter leaders willing to do that. So with that, I will also talk about our affinity groups and their leadership. So we have to date 14 affinity groups. 71% of them have leaders. We had not as much of a response from them. About 30% of them responded. 33 of them had activities. And again, we are so fortunate that 60% of them are still willing to lead. And I do have to make the point that our affinity groups are leaders that are doing this virtual. So they're located all over the world and in different areas, that communities that are represented in affirmation and that do need to be represented in affirmation. But again, we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the presentation about what we see going forward with that.
So something exciting, hopefully you saw it on the Affirmation website or social media. The Associated Press reached out to Affirmation to have an interview with Fred prior to the General Conference of the Church. And the topic was really President Nelson's leadership of the church, and then of, specific to the interview with Fred and Affirmation, how the church is doing on LGBTQ issues. And so one of the points that were made, and I think that this is something that most of us has taken notice of, is the fact that the church is, or Brigham Young University specifically, is promoting the infamous musket fire speech delivered by Elder Holland that uses unfortunate visions of violence, speaking about using musket fire to defend the faith, and then specifically in response to anyone seeking to affirm or to be activists in support of LGBTQ students or staff or the wider community. And so we did have a quote in that Associated Press article that was picked up by newspapers all around the nation. So it's great to know that reporters for the Associated Press are still reaching out to Affirmation, still see Affirmation as a credible source on the subject, an authority on the subject, and then a bit more explanation about sort of why that quote is there is on the website, talking about how the musket fire speech isolates LGBTQ BYU students. So highly recommend going to Affirmation. There's a link to the Associated Press article, and then even sharing that out, because I think that a lot of folks in the LGBTQ Latter-day Saints space are very aware of this talk and are very aware of the fact that it is now required reading for BYU freshmen, which is very disheartening. And so calling attention to that, I think, is important.
So I get to have the excitement of talking about the greatest thing ever, which is what's next. So thank you all for waiting for this time. One of the key things we wanted to talk about, and I had mentioned, I think, in the writing I've done, is the Latin American area is very important to us. And so based on what we see as far as budget, one of the things we wanted to do is make sure that we had a complete special fund just for that particular area as part of our chapter support. So it's our vision and intent to do a fundraising campaign just for the Latin American area. So they will have those funds specifically for them, and we'll retain those at international for them. Again, as we mentioned before earlier, we'll be having an international conference. It is in the planning stages, so we're not quite sure in the sense of the where. We have gotten direction from the board and approval to look at a conference in October based on we can find a location. So that's where we are with international conference. And as far as our board, we are very thankful we have the folks we have on the board, and we do have some positions we need to fill. However, we are making a slight change in what we're doing to get board members, and what we're going to have them do is complete an application. And this way we'll know a lot more about what board members' experiences are, so that we can fit and have a better fit of different talents on our board. So we feel that this will create the best fit for both the board and the people onboarding to the board or who have interest in the board. So as we mentioned as well, we need more chapter leaders in the US. So we're looking to revitalize our US chapters and create more chapters. This will be a process that we'll seriously take on, and we have strategies around that of first, as we say, revitalize a few key chapters to make sure they're up and going and get them on the road to being bigger chapters, and for selected areas, picking those out and creating new chapters. And so also here, you'll see that we're talking about auditing the Latin America chapter activity. We just want to see what the chapters are doing. There are some chapters that are doing great things out there. And so what we'll be doing, and they've asked to meet with us, so we'll be having a meeting with them soon. So we look forward to meeting you if you're one of those leaders in Latin America. And then also for our affinity group, as you can see, they are very important. However, what it is that we are looking for more people to lead the affinity groups and keep those vital, because they are vital to those folks who are part of those communities.
All right, so now the fun part of the evening. Question and answer Q&A with the executive committee. So I've got a few questions that have been submitted ahead of time that we can lean on should we hear crickets at any point during this process. But we would love to hear your questions or even comments are welcome. If you want to put them in the chat, that's fine. If you want to speak on camera, just like raise your hand, and well, I'll be watching the queue and be happy to call on you. But I do see in the chat that we have a question: what is an affinity group? And that is a great question. Fred, do you want to answer that? And I'm going to pull up a link that I can share out for it too.
Sure, I'll be glad to answer that. Affinity group. If you notice, I mentioned in my introduction, affinity groups are specific groups that center around certain aspects of a person's intersectionality in the world. For example, we have a group for different types of spirituality. We have a prepare group, we have our journeys group, we have other groups that are based on where people are in their spiritual journey. That's one type of affinity group. Then we also have different affinity groups based on, for example, we have a group for women, We have a group for, as I mentioned with myself, the people of the global majority are BIPOC group. So we have different areas for that, as well as another group might be, if you haven't heard of it, for folks who are bisexual or people who are asexual. So it's really about the intersectionality of the people we have in affirmation to make sure that they can meet with people who share their concerns. So that's what the affinity group is. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, and the link that I shared will give you the listing of affinity groups. We need to update this page a little bit, but hopefully that'll give you a sense of the different groups that are active in affirmation. So typically they're organized by like faith journeys, gender and gender identity, age and ethnicity, relationships, marriage and family. So like as Fred was saying, it's really the opportunity to connect with a community with similar backgrounds and experiences that you have. So going off of the affinity groups question, Nika asks, currently our affinity groups are mostly on Facebook. Knowing that Facebook users skew older, is affirmation considering other platforms for affinity groups? There has in the past been discussion about trying to use like platforms like Discord to organize different groups. The challenge of that is and really the challenge of any platform is adoption and training, and to make sure our volunteers are well positioned to moderate any new platform that's put into place. But I think your point, Nika, about Facebook skewing older is very well taken. We have also been experimenting with email groups to try to take things off of Facebook a bit more. And some of our chapters have utilized that. And so affinity groups may be able to utilize that too. So it has been discussed. There has not been a lot of movement to do that. But anyone that's been with affirmation for a while knows that we have been very Facebook centric for our online communities. And we are looking at ways, or have in the past, and likely will continue to look at ways of diversifying that. Pulling a question from that was training. So the question is, are there any training projects for Latin America leaders? So as Fred said earlier, we are planning to meet with our leaders from Latin America. And really this is applicable of our leaders everywhere. One of the changes that we are implementing is that in the past, we've had, Affirmation Central, the Executive Committee, the Board of Directors, and then there were regional directors, and underneath the regional directors, there were chapters. We are collapsing that hierarchy a bit because there is very much a need for more direct connection with our chapters as we are working to specifically revitalize and build new chapters in the United States, but really provide support and training for our chapters around the world. So while the question was specific to Latin America, I think you'll be seeing a lot more opportunity to meet with and receive training, meet with the Executive Committee and receive training from Affirmation centrally, no matter where you are. Fred, David, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. So one of the things that we have found is that there's a lot of heart when people want to be chapter leaders, but sometimes there are things that there are more practical things they need to know. So we do have a resource for our chapter leaders that actually is on the website, but we would like to supplement that a bit and actually do a training for leaders so they can better understand some of that content. And the world of a chapter leader, as I can tell you since I was one for quite some time, is that there's so many things that you want to do, and then you have to figure out not only how to do those things, but how to get people to join you. So one of the things that we do need to talk about and get to chapter leaders is how do we go about that process of getting the word out about our chapters, and so that we can meet other people and have them come to meetings and that type of thing. It is not an easy thing to do. We do realize that, and so hopefully we can provide some type of relief in that way.
And I'll just add, as a former chapter leader, uh, there's a work involved, and sometimes after a while, it's time for somebody else to take over, and so that is part of what we're doing. Is some of our leaders have indicated that they are ready to turn the reins over to someone else, and we need to find leaders to take over those places.
So Jeff asks how we envision positioning affirmation with North Star, Gather, Lift, Love, who are competing with attendance at conferences. And I think this gives us an opportunity to talk about a collaborative process that we've actually been engaging with. Fred, you've been well connected with that. Do you want to discuss that and answer the question?
Sure, I'll answer that question. Thank you very much. So the collaboration in its essence is about, and I do feel emotional about this, so please forgive me, is what really matters when people get to the point that they have to make this decision between being LGBTQ and being Mormon. No one should be left out. And so if there's a place for them to have a home at the time that whatever they feel comfortable, that is our best goal, to have them join there. So what this actual collaboration is that what we have done is a combined pamphlet with Lift and Love, North Star, and ourselves to be passed out at meetings, at each other's meetings. And it's based on the principle I just said, that when some person is going to that, they may tend to want to go to North Star. That is their choice. But as we well know, life is but a journey. And so we never know if someone in North Star might be, in a way, wanting to transition to affirmation, or wanting to transition to Lift and Love, or we have people who are part of affirmation and are part of Lift and Love. So our goal is, as you've heard, is try to welcome everyone. So this project is really about getting to an audience that might need us in any way that we can. And so we have collaborated in that way.
Yeah, and go ahead, David. You just unmuted.
I was going to say there's a lot of overlap. So affirmation may be the Big 10 approach, and other organizations may target a smaller slice, but there's still a lot of overlap there. And so people that are in affirmation, it's not uncommon for them to also be involved in other groups as well.
Yeah, and I think the LGBTQ Latter-day Saint landscape has really changed over the last 5 years, especially over the last decade. And you do have a lot more organizations coming out. I think, as both David and Fred were saying, there is a lot of overlap, and there's a lot of opportunity for participation in all the organizations. If that's what you decide that you want to do, that's best for you, that helps you in your journey. I think it's helpful for us to not see the various conferences or organizations as competitors, but as potential partners in supporting this community. and I was really moved when North Star reached out to us to collaborate on this project. And to me, that's an olive branch that I wouldn't have saw coming to affirmation, being that, as we are the Big Ten organization that also affirms the decision to, to walk away from the church if that's what you deem is best for your spiritual, mental, or physical health, that sometimes is not a welcomed approach in other spheres. And so I think that there's been this realization that we are better together. And then hopefully that, this brochure seems like a small thing, but I think it opens the door to better partnership and collaboration in the future. And I know that, one of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that we don't have overlapping conferences, so that they are, by definition, not competing, but providing yet another opportunity, so that, folks can participate in affirmation or they can participate in North Star. I think every one of the organizations has a different way, a different approach to supporting this community. And as opening and welcoming as we can be, I think we're all the better for it. David asked a specific question about finding an affirmation chapter or affinity group, specifically in San Diego, but I'll broaden it to everywhere. We do have a list of communities, including chapters, although this will likely be updated fairly soon, based on some of our work to revitalize and reorganize chapters. But if you go to affirmation.org/communities, you'll see all of the chapters that are currently available. There's ways of emailing the leadership and trying to get in touch with them. There's also Facebook groups that for affirmation, for the affinity groups and the chapters that you can be a part of. Some are more active than others, but that's the best place to get started. And so I'm going to combine a question. Does affirmation plan to reach out to members in key positions in government and the private sector? And what should be affirmation's response to anti-LGBTQ legislation that is being thrown at us? So as a political science major and someone that has worked in politics a bit, one thing I'll note that, affirmation is not a political organization. So we don't take any sort of partisan approach, but we have had meetings. I know that Parents in Affirmation have had some amazing sessions, specifically about impact of legislation on LGBTQ youth and families. We've had amazing conference speakers that have spoke specifically about organizing in response to anti-LGBTQ and then specifically anti-transgender legislation. So some of those can definitely be found on the affirmation website. I highly recommend going and checking those out. I think from my vantage point, just trying to keep folks aware of what's happening is important. It's the legislation and politics of it necessarily isn't, from my vantage point, the primary mission of affirmation. So it's not an area that we spend a lot of time in, but I think that it's an area that we need to be informed about. Fred, David, do you have anything to add to that?
This is Fred. I want to say, if you do look at our charter, you will find that it specifically says that we will tend to remain politically neutral. But again, as Joel has said, we do participate in discussions about how it affects our members, but as far as direct political activity, that is not something we will do.
There's other organizations like Equality Utah, Equality Florida that are carrying the water on the political side.
We have a question in chat from Habib asking, well, first, it's their first time at an affirmation meeting, so welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. But the question is what is the faith or doctrine of affirmation? And Fred, David, do you want to kick off a response to that question?
I don't think I don't think it's an interesting way to talk about it. I think the faith of affirmation is in the queer person, and that they will use their agency to make the best choices for themselves. So whether they want to be all in the church, or if they are somewhere like they have some beliefs but they need some boundaries, or if they've left or they are thinking of going back, wherever you are in your faith journey is your journey, and we aren't here to uh, to push people towards one solution or another. Our position is to support the queer individual in their spiritual path.
That was beautiful. The faith is in the queer individual. I love that. Fred, you unmuted. Do you have something to add?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Yeah, so sometimes I think, especially outside of the United States, there's a tendency to think that affirmation is sometimes somehow an alternative to a church or the church. And that's just not the case. Affirmation is not a religious organization. So there is no, real doctrine of affirmation. I think our mission and vision speak to what we are trying to accomplish, but we are not a substitute for church. But we are trying to support the LGBTQ Latter-day Saint community. So a question that was submitted to us earlier is, in what areas is the organization excelling? This is sometimes hard, because I think as the executive committee, you're dealing with solving all of the problems along the way. Where are we excelling, Fred?
I think we're excelling in the sense that there are a lot of wonderful spirits in this organization. And we should hear more from them and about what they're doing with their lives as they work through this intersection of being LGBT and Mormons, right? So it's a case of, yes, we have folks and we have smaller chapters, but I do believe the chapters we do have, those people are very great spirits and are very spiritual in the way they're expressing it. And what I mean by that, it varies from folks who are, again, still active in the church. There are folks who still have a spirituality, but they choose to go to a church of another faith, but they still share this commonality of having had the LGBT Mormon experience. And those folks are all great spirits, and they come to meetings and we share all that as a common thread. I think I do want to mention is, for me, here in DC, we have our annual Thanksgiving dinner. And one of the traditions is to go around the circle and to talk about what we're thankful for. And again, these people in affirmation are very thankful people too, as well, are going through difficult times, but they have the spirit to think through and express that they're thankful for the spirit and their lives that they have.
Thank you. David, do you have anything to add?
Well, I think echoing what Fred said, the strength of affirmation is its people. And uh, there are certainly challenges that come from being in a queer person with the LDS Church or having a history with the LDS Church, but there are also moments of queer joy, and a lot of that comes in community and by associating with each other. And so I like to think that affirmation is a opportunity for people to get together and feel supported, to feel seen, to feel uh, like I'm part of this group, and then together generate joy in our life.
Thank you. So I'm coming near the end of our pre-submitted questions. If anyone has a question they would like us to answer, please, again, raise your hand if you want to be on the camera, or post to the chat, and we will get to that before we move on to closing out the evening. But the question is, I would like to know if Affirmation as an organization is growing in numbers or an impact on our LGBTQ Mormons. It looks like some areas there's no activity and no participation in events like Pride or meeting with local members. And so we did talk about this a little bit earlier when we were looking at sort of our progress and numbers that are reflecting our community. But, I think that the challenge is that we do need to be more organized locally, to revitalize chapters, to establish new chapters where there is support. And when that happens, you'll see affirmation participating in more prides. Because will be local chapters to support organizing that and to be participating in that. Affirmation will be participating in Utah Pride. So we've got all of that sort of up and running. If you are in the Utah area and want to participate and didn't respond to the survey that we sent out about participating, please let us know, and we'll make sure to connect you with the committee. But there is an intentional effort and investment that we as an executive committee will be making to revitalize chapters, to organize new chapters where there is support enough for one, so that affirmation can be more visible and can be more supportive of the local community. Fred, do you want to add to that?
Sure, I'll be glad to add to that. The challenge simply is that we are an all-volunteer organization. Some of the things that people might expect us to be able to do would be better served by us having more of a staff to help with the administrative part of all of this. But what I'm saying to you is that affirmation has always been volunteer staffed. And so what it does take to operate a chapter is a whole group of people who dedicate their personal time to bring it all together and to make those things in a chapter happen. So what it does require is a critical mass of people to lead it and for it to organize and function. And in many areas, since they're in a place where there's not many Mormons to begin with, it's even more difficult for those chapters because there's not a lot of Mormons around. So the solution actually is trying to get a critical mass in particular cities to activate and become a leadership group. to go out and search for other Mormons in that area. I hope that answers your question. It's a catch-22, of course, but that's simply what it requires. It's always been that way, and it's been that way ever since affirmation was formed. And most people do not know there are quite a number of cities where we had chapters, then they deactivated, and then again, I think we've talked about before, then other people come along and restart them, and they start to come alive again. So it is our hope that we can re-energize our chapters and get a critical group of people to start chapters where we can make a larger chapters. Thank you.
David, anything that you want to add to that?
Oh, I think Fred answered that well.
Yep. The last question I see in chat is asking about international conference this year, and in what city. So Fred shared with us earlier that yes, we are in initial planning stages for the international conference. We are looking at somewhere in Utah and looking at October, likely mid-October. And that is all the information that we are able to put out there. But we are very hopeful of having more information very soon. So be paying attention for some special announcements. Okay. Well, I think we have either answered questions during our presentation or answered all the questions that were submitted. So thank you, everyone who did submit questions. And we just have a few more things we want to discuss before wrapping up. So there was a question that was talking about like, well, what can we do to help? Well, becoming a sustaining member of Affirmation would be a huge help. Sustaining membership starts at $10 a month. And there are some benefits that come along with that. But when it comes to budgeting an affirmation and making decisions about what we are able to do, knowing that there is reliable monthly donations coming in forms a solid bedrock of our budget and decision making. And so we're really trying to grow that program. I know many of you are already sustaining members. So if you are already a sustaining member, please consider making a one-time donation just to help kick off some of the things that we've been discussing this evening. And while I do have the donation page listed on the slide, I will put them in chat as well for your convenience. Again, becoming a sustaining member begins at setting up a recurring monthly donation of at least $10 a month. But we are more than happy to receive one-time donation from you if you are able to support Affirmation financially. That support would be very welcomed and put to very good use, as we were discussing earlier, as we rebuild Affirmation's financial strength and move forward with trying to accomplish the things that we've been discussing tonight in an effort to move Affirmation's mission forward. So please consider doing that. Consider doing that this evening. That would be wonderful. But the links are in the chat to do that.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, so far. So what we want to talk to you about last is about 4 or 5 ways that we can have you take action. So we'll talk about what actions we need you to take, and then how you can directly do those actions by a task. So first thing is recruit new members and help us build our membership. So join Affirmation as a member. Go to affirmation.org about membership. And as you'll see different membership options. And those options do include making a donation, but there are other ways you can be an Affirmation member. So please go there and take a look at what those ways are. And as we talked about, if you're in a local chapter, if there's someone in your ward that you've been talking to and they're interested, bring them. Bring them to an affirmation local community event. Just bring them once. That would be great. They will get exposure to it. And if they decide not to come, that is great. But more likely than not, they will continue coming because someone invited them. So for people to come, you must invite them. So another thing you can do, very easy, is to share our website, our Facebook and Instagram page with friends on social media. If you would do that, again, that puts our name out in more exposure so that people know about us and then be able to come to events like this that are virtual. Or as we have talked about, again, there are local Facebook groups, but if they don't come to find out at their website about us, then they can't share in what you're doing or what we're doing overall. So the second thing you can do is get connected now with Affirmation News. If you go to the website right now, we have a button called Get Connected Now. And what that does, it allows you to subscribe to get our e-newsletter, which is a very popular thing. People enjoy it. We work really hard on the content for that. So please go there and get connected now with our news. And the third thing is to participate in our communities. Those communities, as we talked about, are local, could be in Dallas, could be in DC, could be in Kansas City. Just go to our website at affirmation.org communities, and you can find out information if there's community close to you. And then our affinity groups, the same thing. There is information there on communities, also about affinity groups, which we talked about earlier. But one of the things you might not realize is that you can help by contacting your community leaders, be it local or even in the affinity groups, and give them an idea for a chapter event or affinity event or something to engage the community. Believe me, as I talked about, we're all volunteers. And so if you have an idea, just pass the idea on to them, and that would be very helpful so that they can work with you and you can make that idea happen. So again, contact community leader, and then also offer to host an event locally. I know for most local affirmation chapters, meetings are held in people's homes. So we always need a home to host the event. So if you would just talk to your community leader, if you need a way to contact them, let us know. But just offer to host an event for them in your home or someone's home you know, or either help them bring together a virtual meeting as part of an affinity group with an idea you've had to discuss with the people in the group. That would be very helpful. That would help more people participate. So the next thing we talked about is volunteering as a community leader. So as you heard us talk about, we need community leaders. We need them very, very much. So you might consider contacting your local community leader and say, can I help you lead this community? Sometimes people are leading and they would love for you to just walk up and say, I think I can help you by doing this. They would greatly appreciate it. And then also the thing you can do is contact the executive committee to volunteer as an area leader. We need those. That area leaders are much like in the church where they are leading several chapters in the area. For example, we have an area leader for the US and Canada. As we talked about, there is an area leader for Latin America. So please talk to us about that. And then lastly, as we talked about the board member application, just talk to us about being a board member when the openings are announced. However, with that said, we want to make sure that people understand when you become a board member, there are specific responsibilities that are different than the other levels. And we will be passing out to those people who are interested a a pamphlet that explains what the expectations are for board members for affirmation. So the last piece we want to talk about in action, which is another simple one, and actually you've been doing it all during this call, which is to give us your feedback. Tell us what do you want to know more about. A lot of you pose questions you want to know more about. Keep them coming. And how do you want to get involved? So again, there are plenty of things to get involved, like I said here, with recruiting new members or getting connected or participating or volunteering. So let us know how in each of these things, how you want to get involved. So we were planning to do a post-event feedback poll to get an idea of what your thoughts were in case you weren't able to post in the chat, or you felt uncomfortable doing it, or you have a specific question that you couldn't type out or whatever, and we can talk about that. But thanks again for being here, and thank you for listening to this call to action, because what we really need you to do, if you would please, is take one of these actions to help us out and to become a better affirmation and to spread the word about affirmation to some folks who haven't received it yet. Thank you.